Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Schaut, ihr Sünder, which translates to Behold, you sinners. Fairly straightforward chorale, not too much to write home about in this one. There is something interesting going on here in the penultimate phrase, but other than that, it's fairly straightforward. Let's hop into the analysis. So we have one flat in the key signature, we start on G minor, and we end on G major. So this is one of those cases where we have one flat, which typically indicates to our current relationship with key signatures that we're in the key of D minor. But I think the overall tonality of this chorale is G minor. I think Bach looked to key signatures for pragmatic purposes. Would he have to write more E flats in, or would he have to include more E naturals? And that's what the key signature reflects. So it's not always just based on what you see on the at the beginning of the score. It's something that you would learn as you experience the harmony and how the keys move from one to the other. But we start off in G minor, perfect authentic cadence, first phrase, very simple, tonic triad. Then we have F sharp, A, D, and A. This G is like a lower suspension, what would that be, like a 5-6? No, it would probably be like a 2-3 suspension under the tenor. But that would be some type of, so not a 7-6 chord, sorry, a 5-6 chord. D major over F sharp. Then we get G minor, G, G, D, and B flat. And our final chord is another G minor chord, just respelled. We have G, D, B flat, and G. Sorry, I spelled it from the top there. It's the same chord. We don't have to reanalyze it. Next phrase ends in a half cadence, more specifically a Phrygian half cadence. We'll take a look at how that ends up working out when we get to the end of the phrase. We start off with another G minor chord, G, B flat, G, and D. No need to reanalyze. A, C, F sharp, and C. This G is a 7-6 suspension over the bass. This is F sharp diminished over A. And typically when we see a 1 chord going to a 7-6 chord, we typically expect a 1-6 chord afterwards. B flat, D, G, and B flat. That's a very common pattern in Bach, taking two similar chords and bridging them with a chorded diatonic step below in first inversion. Passing tone in the bass, and then we get D major, D, D, F sharp, and A. This G is a 4-3 suspension over the bass. It's common to see 4-3 suspensions over root position, dominant triads especially. And then we get our predominant chord, which leaves a little room for debate here. We have, in my opinion, E flat, C, G, and G, which is C minor in first inversion. It's typically a 4-6 chord that leads us into our final chord in the half cadence, the Phrygian half cadence, but I think you could make the argument that this is a 6-7 chord as well. E flat, D, G, and G, but I do think this D is a 7-6 suspension in this case. The suspension isn't always the chord, it isn't always the known chord tone. Sometimes it's part of the chord, but in this case I do think it's operating as a non-chord tone. It's just, it just also happens to be an analyzable chord here. And then our half cadence ends with the 5 chord like we would expect. D, F sharp, D, and A. D major. Next phrase takes us to the key of B flat major. We end in a perfect authentic cadence. We can kind of liken these two phrases in the first system to one another. One is in G minor, one is in B flat, and I do think this is a direct modulation to B flat. Something about a half cadence with the F sharp here, when juxtaposed with the B flat with the F natural in it, makes it just feel like its own separate idea. So we start off with B flat major over D, 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 F natural, and B flat, which is our tonic triad in first inversion. And then B flat here does briefly take the chord and put it back into a root position before we get A, C, F, and C, which is our 5 chord in first inversion, seeing kind of a similarity here to the beginning of the chorale. And that takes us to B flat major, B flat, F, and D, tonic triad in root position, and then B flat major again, B flat, D, F, and B flat. So the first and third phrases are very similar to one another. I would even call this just A again, or maybe A prime because of the fact that it's in B flat, but still the phrases are pretty much the same thing. The next phrase takes us, or we're still in the key of B flat major, but we do get some E flats, or sorry, some A flats in there as well, which makes it a little bit more ambiguous in terms of the harmony and what chords are being tonicized throughout the phrase. So we start off with a B flat major chord with this passing A flat, B flat, F, B flat, and D, which is not just our tonic, but rather 5 of 4. This B flat chord is with the A flat as a passing 7th here is implying the fact that there is a tendency for this A flat to want to resolve to G, and that G is going to be the 3rd of E flat major. We have G, E flat, B flat, and E flat, which is our 4 chord first inversion, E flat major over G. Neighbor tone in the alto here before we go to F major, sorry, B flat major over F, 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 B flat, and D, which is a 1-6-4 chord. Typically we would expect this in like a cadential context, but here we see it just as a passing 1-6-4, or maybe it is part of a cadential context and it just so happens that the next chord is interrupting the two, which Bach has been known to do. We have E flat, G, B flat, and C, C minor 7 over E flat. We know that Bach loves 2-6-5 chords, especially in cadential contexts. That typically takes us to 5, F, F, A, and C, which is F major, root position, passing 7th in the tenor, and then we have our perfect authentic cadence here with B flat as our final chord. B flat, D, F, and B flat. So maybe there's an interrupted 1-6-4-5 progression here. It's difficult because the 2-6-5 happens here on the strong beat. I don't know exactly. I feel like this 1-6-4 chord is just a passing 6-4 chord, but maybe it could be an interrupted 1-6-4-5. The voices do resolve that way. The D goes down to C, or even a little bit earlier, and the B flat goes down to A. So either way, I think they're both valid analyses. Maybe there is an interrupted 1-6-4-5 progression going on here. Okay, next phrase takes us back to the key of G minor. We pretty much go directly to G minor right from the very start. We start the phrase off with a B flat major chord. We have B flat, F, and D, which is our tonic triad. And because it's a new system, I will reiterate the Roman numeral. It feels kind of awkward to leave a blank spot here, like I would if it were on the same system, just because it's a new, just a new phrase, a new idea, and a new line. So on top of that, that's also where we're going to be pivoting to the key of G minor. 1 is going to turn into our 3 chord, and we're going to get some transitive harmony here with A, C, F sharp, and C. I think this B flat and this F are, I guess, just non-chord tones, or sort of like suspensions. We do have like some chromaticism going on here in the alto, but I do think what's being implied here is F sharp diminished over A, kind of similar to what we had here in our second phrase. But 3 going to 7-6 is transitive harmony, and I've been using that term to describe chord progressions that go against the cycle of falling fifths. So 7 typically wants to go to 3 in this context, but when we have 3 going to 7, it's the same voice leading that would take us in either direction. So if 7 can go to 3, 3 can go to 7, and Bach does that with quite a bit of frequency in his writing. But 7 is going to take us where we would expect, to 1, G, D, G, and B flat, or tonic triad, and that takes us to another 1 chord, just like the beginning of our chorale. G, B flat, D, and G. Next phrase is going to pivot to the key of F major. We end in a perfect authentic cadence. We start the phrase off, I think actually, with this G minor chord here being our pivot chord, just because I can't help but acknowledge the fact that this G minor feels like 2 going into a 5, which then goes into 1. Calling this C major chord here like 4 in the key of G minor, and 5 in the key of F major. I guess that would be valid too. It's just with the context that's presented, even though there's a gap in between, it feels like this G minor feels part of the whole harmonic narrative, at least based on my relationship with the harmony. We have E, C, G, and C. Like I said, it's our 5 chord first inversion, passing 7th in the tenor, and then we have F, A, G, and C. G being a 9/8 suspension over the bass. It's our tonic triad, root position F major, F is the resolution to this suspension, E is a little neighbor tone, and then we get D, A, F, and B flat. I think you could analyze this as with G being the root of the chord or B flat being the root of the chord. I feel like the A is part of the chord here, so I'm going to analyze this as B flat major 7 over D, which is 4, 6, 5. And that takes us to C, A, F, and A, which is our tonic triad and second inversion. F major over C, passing tone in the tenor, C, C, E, and G. There's our 5 chords, so this is an uninterrupted 1, 6, 4, 5 progression. And then B flats are passing 7th here in the tenor. You can use a little bracket to show the relationship between the two of those chords. It doesn't really do too much, but it's just a habit from having learned that in harmony when I took harmony classes. And then we cadence on F major, F, A, C, and F. Tonic triad root position. So now we've got to the phrase that I talked about at the beginning of the chorale. I think it ends in an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of E flat major, but it's difficult to say whether or not we start the phrase in the key of E flat major. When I listen to the melody, I hear 1, 2, 3, 1 in the key of B flat major, and the beginning of this phrase seems quintessentially B flat major to me, but you could analyze this phrase in the key of E flat major if you were so inclined, because the ending is very much E flat major like in the bass with 7, 5, 1 going on here, and with the A flat as well. So there's no doubt in my mind that we end in the key of E flat, but whether we start in the key of E flat is up for debate, and I'm inclined to believe that we start in the key of B flat, so we get this short phrase where two keys get explored. Maybe it's because the melody and the harmony have some type of conflict, but because my harmonic intuition is like driven by the melody, I can't help but hear the beginning in the key of B flat major. So we start off with a G minor chord, that is 2 in the key of F major, G, D, G, and B flat, which is also 6 in the key of B flat major. You could also analyze F as our 5 in the key of B flat major, but it didn't quite feel that way to me. We then have F major in root position, F, F, A, and C, which I think this A natural is what really makes me feel like the B flat major as a tonic is being exercised here, because we would expect A flat in the key of E flat major. So I do think this is our 5 chord with the passing 7th in the bass, and then Bach elides with the key of E flat major by, instead of resolving to our tonic, which I guess for analytical purposes it is our tonic, it also happens to be our 5 chord in the key of E flat major because of this passing 7th here in the the alto. Sorry, I just had some brain fog there, but this is also in first inversion, D, F, B flat, and D, which does turn into root position here, B flat, F, A flat, and D, which is actually a fully voiced 7 chord, B flat 7, which is operating as the dominant in the key of E flat, right here, E flat, G, and B flat. And you might even call this a subdominant cadence, something that I talked about at length in the beginning of the series. Like in the first, say, 100 videos, we saw quite a few subdominant cadences where Bach would move to a key and then would pivot to the key of the subdominant right at the end, and it kind of felt like a counterpart to some of those ambiguous half cadences, imperfect authentic cadences that we would come across, where Bach would cadence in with the dominant at the end, but would precede it with its dominant. When you would do that same effect with the subdominant, it feels like a modulation. It does not feel like well, there really isn't a word for a cadence that ends on 4, going from 1 to 4. It'd be kind of like it would be like the opposite of a half cadence, or the inversion of a half cadence, I guess, because it would be a 5th going down rather than a 5th going up. But yeah, subdominant cadence where we feel like we're flipping to the key of the subdominant right at the end, kind of like how, like I said, those half cadences can appear as well when a half cadence is preceded by its dominant. But the last of the phrases in this chorale takes us back to the key of G minor. We don't go there immediately. You can make an argument that we go there immediately, but I don't think it happens until later into the phrase. We start off with G7, B natural, F, G, and D. G7 over B is 5/6 of 6 in the key of E flat. That takes us to C minor, C, E flat, G, and C, which is our 6th chord, passing tone in the bass, and then we get E flat, B flat, G, and G, which is our tonic triad and root position. Kind of an interesting cadence here. Or not an interesting cadence, sorry, an interesting progression, 6 going to 1. We would typically expect 4/6 to go to 1, so in the key of like E flat, we would expect maybe a flat chord here rather than a C minor chord. But the difference between C minor and A flat is just this G here, so 6 and 4/6 are they're basically the same chord. But I think our tonic here is also operating as our 6th chord in the key of G minor. We have some passing tones in the melody and the tenor before we go to D, D, G, and B flat, which is our tonic triad and second inversion. That takes us to D major, D, D, F sharp, and A, which is our 5 chord, another 1-6-4-5 cadence, delayed passing 7th in the tenor, and then we end on G major, G, B natural, D, and G, as Bach often does in his minor chorales. He ends with the Picardy third. And that's today's analysis. Really not too much to write home about in this particular chorale. We do have a mid-phrase modulation, which I've talked about in my previous videos. The idea that typically when Bach modulates, say for example here, he'll stay in that key until the end of the phrase, but it's not super uncommon for Bach to modulate to a new key in the next phrase and then modulate to another key that isn't the same, right? It's another key by the end of the phrase. And I've been calling that a mid-phrase modulation in my own notes, and I've been keeping track of that. Also, this potential subdominant cadence, if you analyze this whole phrase in the key of E flat major, that's one thing, but I think we start in B flat and pivot to E flat at the end, which is kind of an interesting way of harmonizing it, and does present a unique situation where the subdominant gets introduced as a new key at the end of the phrase, or maybe not. Maybe we're cadencing on 4. It's difficult to say. And we also have our tonic operating as 5 of 4. Like kind of this is our tonic operating as 5 of 4, kind of sorta, but we do have more of a secondary dominant operating 5 of 4 here, where we don't modulate to a different key. We stay in the key of B flat. But other than that, I think those are the only big takeaways from this particular chorale. So I'm going to cap the video off on those thoughts. If you're interested in following me along on the journey to analyze all of Bach's chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel. You can hit the notification icon and like the video if you enjoyed the content as well. Thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.